You wake up, head to the kitchen to boil water for morning tea, and the stove sputters out. The gas cylinder is empty. When you walk to the local supplier, you find dozens of neighbors staring at the exact same thing, a wall of empty red gas cylinders. Frustrated, you hop on your motorcycle to head to work. You pull into the petrol pump, look at the meter, and realize fuel prices have spiked. Not by 1 or 2 rupees, but by a massive 5 to 15 rupees per liter overnight. By the afternoon, the inconvenience turns into panic. You call relatives working in Saudi Arabia or Qatar, only to hear air raid sirens in the background. They tell you work has stopped, the skies are hazy with smoke trails, and they are sheltering from active missile strikes. Your empty gas cylinder and the sirens over your family's labor camp are the direct byproduct of an escalating war over 4,000 kilometers away. An intensifying war between the United States, Israel, and Iran is actively paralyzing everyday life in Nepal, and it is violently exposing the country's absolute reliance on the Middle East. To understand how a foreign war empties a Nepali kitchen, we have to look at a 7-decade grudge. Back in 1953, the US and the UK orchestrated the removal of Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, specifically to stop him from nationalizing Iran's massive oil industry. That intervention planted a deep resentment that eventually exploded. During the 1979 Islamic Revolution, massive crowds flooded Tehran, and the new government officially cemented the United States as its primary geopolitical enemy. Fast forward to today, and that animosity centers on a specific threat. Israel and the United States have launched an aggressive, preemptive campaign to permanently dismantle Iran's advancing nuclear and missile programs. Recently, the conflict reached an extreme boiling point. Allied strikes targeted Iranian military sites, entirely eliminating top military leadership and even the nation's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Despite catastrophic losses to its leadership and infrastructure, Iran refuses to surrender. Instead, they have launched severe retaliatory missile and drone strikes across the region, targeting allied military bases and vital economic hubs. And that retaliation hits a very specific geographic bottleneck. This is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage of water sitting between Iran, Oman, and the UAE. At its narrowest point, it is barely 33 kilometers wide. The volume of trade that funnels through this tiny corridor is staggering. 20% of the entire world's crude oil and natural gas supply must navigate this exact waterway to reach global markets. Iran's primary retaliatory tactic is to choke this artery. They have actively blockaded the strait, threatening to set fire to passing commercial vessels and launching direct attacks on cargo ships. This triggers immediate panic in the global market. Marine insurance companies outright refuse to cover vessels entering the conflict zone. Hundreds of ships are trapped at sea, and the price of crude oil skyrockets past $110 a barrel. That severed supply chain leads directly to the Himalayas. India imports roughly 90% of its liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, through this exact strait. India refines that fuel and acts as Nepal's sole energy supplier. When the Strait of Hormuz chokes, Indian refineries starve. In response, the Nepal Oil Corporation is forced to drastically hike prices at the pump and ration cooking gas by issuing half-filled cylinders to the Nepali public. But oil isn't the only thing flowing between the Himalayas and the Gulf. Over 2 million Nepali citizens currently live and work in the Middle East. For these migrant workers, the geopolitical chess match is a terrifying ground reality. They suddenly find their construction sites and labor camps caught in the crossfire, with drones flying overhead and missile shrapnel falling right outside their windows. The danger is lethal. When a drone strike hit the UAE, a Nepali citizen was killed in the blast. That single casualty sent a wave of widespread panic through families waiting for phone calls back home. Nepal's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is now scrambling to establish emergency contact networks. They are preparing contingency plans for a logistical nightmare, coordinating mass civilian evacuations by air and sea. Millions of Nepali workers now find themselves trapped in a live combat zone, turning a regional war into a direct threat to the lives of Nepal's working class. The human toll quickly triggers a compounding financial disaster. As missiles fall, businesses across the Middle East halt their operations, and Nepali migrant workers stop receiving their wages. The scale of Nepal's reliance on those foreign wages is immense. Every single month, total remittances inject roughly 200 billion rupees into the Nepali economy. This chart shows the critical vulnerability of that income stream. A massive 40% of Nepal's total remittance lifeline comes strictly from workers inside the Middle East. If that money stops flowing, the domestic impact multiplies. Without the influx of foreign cash to absorb the shock of rising petrol prices, the cost of transporting food and basic goods inside Nepal will simply skyrocket. The country faces a terrifying dual economic collapse. Nepal's physical energy supply is being cut off at the exact moment its primary source of national income is frozen. Even if diplomats sign a ceasefire tomorrow, the damage is done. The conflict has exposed systemic vulnerabilities that leave Nepal fully defenseless against the next global crisis. The immediate necessity is to pivot away from imported fossil fuels and aggressively pursue domestic energy independence. Nepal must rapidly accelerate its domestic hydropower development. Generating its own electricity is the only viable way to replace its dangerous reliance on Middle Eastern LPG and Indian refined petrol. Building that infrastructure directly solves the second crisis. Massive domestic energy projects create local jobs, giving citizens the opportunity to work at home rather than exporting cheap labor to volatile war zones. Nepal has no control over Middle Eastern missiles. However, developing domestic energy and local jobs ensures that the next regional crisis won't immediately paralyze the country's economy or endanger its citizens.